Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I think we can all cheer because I think I'm close to the end. So let me very briefly cover two topics on my one card. I want to take the discussion away a little bit from being about things that divide us and talk about a couple of things that unite us. As individuals, as parents or uncles or grandparents or brothers or sisters, I want to talk about a couple of things that we can all relate to. The first thing I want to talk about is fear. In my own life, I will call it the tale, we can call it the tale of two grandmothers. My grandmother, Victoriana Almodova, was an Apache Indian. And as a little boy growing up, there were no nursing homes. There was no, your grandmother came to live with you, and you took care of your grandmother until she died. And I always wondered why my grandmother would hide when somebody knocked on the door. I never understood that. Until later on in my adult years, when my sisters and I, my parents, were around a table talking, and that came up. My father said that as a little girl growing up, as an Apache Indian, and to tell you the truth, I don't know whether she was a U.S. citizen or not. But as a little girl growing up, there was a price to be paid for the scalps of Apache Indians, even in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so every time somebody that she didn't expect knocked on the door, she hid. And now looking back on that, I think, wow, what a horrible way to live. My other grandmother, her name was Cecilia Paredes, and I do know that she was not a citizen. Cecilia Paredes was born in Chihuahua and came over when she married my grandfather. And she never became a U.S. citizen, but she never went back to Mexico again because she was always afraid that she'd not get to come back. And why I tell you that is because I tell you about my grandmother because she had a lot of grandchildren. And she played with her grandchildren. I still have the stuff she gave me as a little kid that when he's old enough, I'll give to Nicolas. But I will tell you that children are scrupulously honest. On my last trip back from home, when I was driving from Austin when I was driving from Alpine, I got stopped for speeding. Marilena and Nicolas and I are all in the car. And the trooper asked me if I've been stopped before. And Nicolas, who wasn't even in the conversation, pops up from the back seat and says, well, he hasn't been stopped today. Well, I give you that as an example of children being scrupulously honest. And can you imagine what happens if we ask kids to be the lead witnesses against their grandparents and against their parents? Because we start talking to them in the public schools, in the emergency rooms, wherever in this state, about where your parents are from, are they citizens? And can you imagine the long-term damage that that does to a family relationship? I will tell you, I have no idea how I got to the House. I have no idea how I made it through law school because my original plan was to teach English literature. And so let me revert to what makes me feel comfortable. Emerson tells us that consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. But I will tell you that for me there's some value in consistency. And the one thing that I will say about this is that I had the privilege of being the Democratic Caucus chairman while Governor Richards and Governor Bush both served as governors of Texas. And when Governor Bush was elected and through the course of his service as governor, at the beginning he was a little suspicious, I guess is the word. My English is leaving. He was, I was a little suspect to him because I had been very close to Governor Richards. But as we got to know each other, one of the interesting things about Governor Bush is that he began to talk to me. He said, "Pete, you're the future of the Republican Party. You need to come home to the Republican Party. You're conservative. You really, and we had a lot of conversations about philosophy. We had a lot of conversations about the opportunity that the Republican Party might give to Latinos. We had a lot of those. And when he asked me one day, he said, "What does it mean? What can you tell me? Tell me what the core values are of being a Democrat." And I had to think about it because I said, well, individual rights for people, and we support, education, and we support. And he looked at me and he stopped me in the middle of the conversation and he said, "Pete, I can tell you 3 things about the Republican Party. The 3 core values of the Republican Party," he said, "were fewer taxes, less government, and local control." Those are the 3 core values that we talked about. To this day, I can't really tell you in bullet points what 3 core values are about the Democratic Party. But what I can tell you is that House Bill 12 doesn't create fewer taxes. It doesn't create less government. And it certainly isn't about local control. To revert back a little bit to that English literature background that I have, let me talk to you about Animal Farm and George Orwell. Because those of us who have been here for a while and those of us who have been in positions of authority, be it someone like Speaker Craddock or someone like Warren Chisholm, who's had the opportunity to chair appropriations, or Mr. Pitts, who does chair it today, there is a tendency that we all have to be careful of. And that is the tendency to forget who we are and where we came from and get carried away in the moment, get carried away. And we fight that, all of us, even as one of the 150. Each of us fights that on occasion to remember who we are, where we came from, and what we're about, and not get carried away in the member-centric world of this chamber that we live in. But George Orwell is pretty interesting in a book that was banned originally in Russia. It's called Animal Farm. And in Animal Farm, the animals overthrow the humans because they think the humans are corrupt and they're bad and they're all sorts of other things. And the animals take over and they run their own farm. And they want to be different. They want to draw a stark contrast with those who came before them because they feel like they have a new mandate to do things a different way. And you know what? What happens to those, particularly the pigs in the end and the rest of the animals in Animal Farm, is they find out that they're just like the people who came before them. We have to really, because we have power and authority, doesn't mean that we should always use it. We should still be mindful of the individual rights. We should still be mindful of the individual situations. And we should still be mindful of the fact that our country, which we all, every single one of us loves, I think with our last drop of blood, our country is meant for all of us. And legislation that is designed or has the impact of dividing us is legislation that we should treat with a great deal of circumspection. I think this bill, in the final analysis, does more harm than good. I think it creates a great deal of fear for grandmothers and grandfathers, for aunts and uncles, for parents, for brothers, and for sisters. I urge all of you to be consistent in your arguments, to be respectful of each other as we debate through the rest of the remainder of the session. And I know that we've made up our minds, and we'll vote how we're going to vote. But again, it's how we do it. I hope we do it with respect. I hope we do it with mutual understanding. And I hope at the end of the day, we all remember that we're all Texans, and really, we're all friends. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And I urge you to think about your vote as we go on about our business today.